Good morning, everyone. Today, we are going to learn about an almost forgotten skill called letter writing, and it's actually making a comeback. I know that, we have social media and we have cell phones, but you know what? There's nothing that beats a handwritten letter, and it's probably one of the most special things that you can receive, not only in these times where we're kind of on our own and social distancing, but in your life, it's always very considerate and thoughtful to write a handwritten letter to your friends, family, or your teachers. And I'm going to tell you a little secret. Your teachers love getting mail. So let's get started. This book is called How to Write a Letter by Cecilia Minden and Kate Roth. It is part of the series called Language Arts Explorer Junior. Notice how there is a table of contents located on at the beginning of the book. A table of contents, if you remember, breaks a book into its most important parts or subjects. In this case, it tells us the different parts of the process for writing a letter. As you can see, a friendly letter has 5 main parts. If you have a camera, this would be a good thing to take a picture of. The 5 main parts are the heading, the greeting, the body, the closing, and the signature. So in the heading is actually where your address goes, along with the date, and you'll put the day that you wrote the letter. Next is the greeting, which are the words that begin the letter, which include the recipient's name or who you're sending the letter to. We often use dear, D-E-A-R, dear, to be able to open a letter. Next, you'll have your body. This is the main part of the letter and where you can ask questions and talk about a few different topics within your letter, perhaps some of the things that you've been up to since you have been away from school. Next, you'll have your closing. Your closing is the final words that you'll use to close out your letter. You can use your friend, yours truly, thankfully. There are many different ways to close a letter. Finally, you will provide your signature. And this, if you are typing your letter, this is actually a space in which you will leave it open and you will sign this by hand. But I'll tell you, a completely handwritten, neatly handwritten letter is very, very special to the person who is receiving it. Stationery is a special kind of paper and it's used for writing letters. Your parents or someone who maybe writes a lot of notes perhaps has some special stationery. Sometimes it comes with matching envelopes. You could also use plain white paper and white envelopes. Here are some of the things that you may need in order to complete this activity: notebook paper, stationery or an envelope, a stamp, which is how the letter is actually going to be it's the payment for the letter to be sent, a pencil with an eraser, a pen, and we'll talk about why we use a pen and where we use a pen, a dictionary in case you maybe need to check your spelling. So the greeting. This is where you want to think about who's going to get your letter. This will help you to decide what to write. Maybe you're going to write to your grandpa who lives far away, and you want him to be your pen pal. This is someone who writes to you and you write back. So let's grab a pencil and a sheet of paper and let's start by writing our friendly letter. Remember, the first part of our friendly letter is our heading and our greeting. So first, you're going to use, as an example, the letter we did before as a model. Next, you'll write your heading. The first part of the heading is your address, and it goes in the top left-hand corner of the page. Then you will write today's date below your address, and that's part 1, the heading. Now you'll move on to the greeting, and you'll write Dear and the recipient's name. Don't forget, you'll want to make sure to put a comma after the person's name. Now we're ready for part 3. So before we start writing our letter, sometimes it's a good idea for us to start to brainstorm. The news of your letter goes in the body. What news would you like to share? What would the person you're writing like to read about? So let's make a list of some ideas for your letter, and you'll do this on a separate sheet of paper. It could be a game that you learned to play with a sibling, maybe a book that you've read, or a TV show that you've watched, or perhaps a craft that you've tried for the first time. Anything that you would like to share, you're going to make a list of all the things that you might want to include. So you, on that separate sheet of paper, will choose 2 ideas from your list. You write each idea on one line of the notebook paper, but make sure to leave some space between those 2 ideas. In this case, the letter is using the zoo and soccer tryouts. You will write 2 or 3 sentences about each idea. These sentences will become a paragraph. You can also write questions. Your pen pal will answer these questions when he or she writes back. Work on your sentences until they're just right. Use a dictionary to check your spelling. And I'll tell you, as just a piece of advice, when you write something, if you pause and then read it back to yourself out loud, this helps to help proof edit your work. Then you will refer back to the letter that you started. So remember, the letter that we started had our heading and our greeting. Now we're going to start writing the body, which we brainstormed on the separate sheet of paper. You will then use a pen to copy your paragraphs to the letter. So pencil for practice, a pen for your letter. You'll want to make sure that you indent each paragraph. Indentation means that we go a little bit in, like 5 finger spaces in to a paragraph before starting it. Look at the letter on page 5 to see indented paragraphs. And we'll see another example at the end. Now you have the body of your friendly letter. What do you think comes next? Okay, so we have our heading, our greeting, and our body. What comes after our body? The closing. So here we are going to think about, how do we want to say goodbye? There are many different ways to close a letter. You can choose any one you'd like. Some people like to think up funny closings for their letter. Others want to express gratitude, and then others like to be a little bit more formal. It really depends on the way you and your personality want to shine through in that closing. Write your signature below the closing. You'll only want to sign your first name if you know the person well. Did you forget something? Add a postscript, and this is a short message that goes after your name. So maybe you have something you want to share as a fun fact or a little piece of information that doesn't go quite in any of your paragraphs and doesn't really warrant a lot of elaboration or large paragraph, but you might want to just include it at the end with P.S. I learned how to ride a bike this weekend, for example. So in the closing, here are your instructions. Choose a closing for your letter. Some examples are your friend, laughs and lollipops, yours truly. Make sure the first letter of the first word is uppercase. The rest of the words should be lowercase. Put a comma at the end of the closing. Sign your name below the closing, and if needed, add a PS below your signed name. We're almost ready. Now we're at the envelope section. All that is left is to put an envelope together. There are post offices all over the world, and they take care of a lot of mail. So you want to make sure to help them by making sure everything on your envelope is correct and written really neatly. You'll always want to make sure to use a pen when addressing an envelope. If you're new to this, you may want to start writing in pencil and then copy it over in pen in case you make a mistake, because sometimes we make mistakes. And so if this is your first time, start it in pencil and make sure to trace over it in pen. So here are your instructions on how to address an envelope. First, you will find that seal flap, and that should be at the top. This is that triangular piece that flaps over and closes the envelope. This needs to be at the top. You will write your name and address in the upper left corner. And this is going to be on the side that doesn't have any paper coming together. It's going to look like one clean sheet. You'll then write the name and address of the person getting the letter in the center of the envelope. You'll put a stamp in the top right-hand corner. If your letter is missing any of these three things, you will not have your letter delivered to your special friend. So it's very important that you put your address and your name in the top left corner, that you put a stamp in the top right corner, and then you put your recipient's information in the center. I'm going to tell you a little secret. I write really big. So you want to make sure that in the center, that you don't write too big to where everything doesn't fit, or too small to where it's too hard to read. So you might want to practice on a separate sheet of paper writing someone's name and address and then transfer it over, or as I recommended, maybe write it in pencil first and then trace over it in pen. So now you're ready to mail. Here's the checklist. And again, parents, if you have a phone and want to take a picture, these are all the things that you want to make sure you have in your letter before you send it out. Did I write a heading in the upper left-hand corner? Did I use a greeting like dear? Did I spell the person's name correctly? Did I remember a comma after the name? Is the body of the letter clear and easy to understand? Are my paragraphs indented? Did I spell all the words correctly? Did I include a closing? If the closing is more than one word, does only the first word begin with a capital letter? Did I remember the comma? Did I sign my name? Does the envelope have my address and the reader's address? Is there a stamp in the top right-hand corner? If you answer yes to all these questions, then you are ready to mail your letter. So you'll take your letter and you'll place it in your envelope. You'll seal it shut, and don't forget to mail that letter. It won't take too long to reach the reader. Most of the time, mail that's delivered locally is received within 2 days. Soon, you may find a letter in the mail just for you.
Even though